The weekly Cybercrime and Business Podcast is brought to you by Surfwatch Labs. Surfwatch Labs delivers cyber risk intelligence solutions that help organizations understand the potential for cyber attacks, determine the impact to their business, and proactively address threats head-on. Hello everybody out there. Today is March 20th, 2015. I am Jeff Peters, the HackSurfer editor. I'm here with Matt Leifus, HackSurfer writer, and Eric Severson, Surfwatch Labs data analyst. A little later after our discussion, we're going to have an interview with Dave LeClair. He's the VP of Product Marketing at Unitrends. And we talked about all the ransomware that's been in the news lately and what businesses need to know and do in order to stay safe on that front. But yeah, jumping right into it, Matt, maybe we can start it off with the top cyber headlines from the week.
Sure. When we took a look at Surfwatch Labs data, there were three targets that stood out. To start with, there were several targets that were part of, they're all Bitcoin mining pools. They were all victims of a DDoS attack. So we're talking about NiceHash, Ghash, CKPool, BW.com, and AntPool. Some of the companies even reported that they were receiving a demand for payment to stop the DDoS, so, in a sense, like they were being held for ransom. And the companies are warning people that, to expect future outages from these DDoS attacks because there's not a whole lot they can do to stop it. Next, we have Advantage Dental. They announced this week that 151,000 of their patients' information was compromised after an internal membership database was hacked. They did point out that there was no financial data that was stolen, but it was the usual targets, social security number, names, things like that. And then we had the big one. It was a Premera Blue Cross. This is the latest health insurer breach, and this is something that's definitely been trending. 11 million customers had their financial and medical data stolen. It's being talked about and believed that it's a state-sponsored espionage group in China that's behind the attack. And I thought we could kind of kick it off there, guys. Insurance, healthcare breaches, obviously Anthem was the big one. This has happened a lot this year, and the effects of these attacks have been pretty big.
So Premera, this one's been interesting. It's smaller than Anthem by quite a bit, only 11 million as opposed to the nearly 80 million from Anthem. But some of the information was different. They actually got medical info, which was not taken in some of the other breaches. They got financial, personal stuff, social security info, all of that as well. So this is a bad one. And interestingly to me, it was discovered basically right after the Anthem data breach was. Anthem shared information on how they discovered theirs, and apparently Premera found theirs very soon after, but didn't announce until this week.
What's interesting about this year so far, 2014 was really all about the retail breach. It seems like there's a lot of healthcare and sort of insurance-related stuff. This year, obviously we had Anthem, that was 80 million people. Then this week we had the Premera Blue Cross, that was 11 million. Another medical insurer, LifeWise, had 250,000 people that they notified of a breach. And then Advantage Dental, like Matt said, dental service in the Pacific Northwest, they notified 150,000 people. Our own Adam Meyer, he's been sort of going around doing a lot of interviews and stuff because everyone's sort of been talking about all these health insurance breaches. He was just quoted saying that multiple health insurers have recently detected breaches with similar tactics and timelines, which indicates seriously elevated risk levels to health insurers and the healthcare sector generally. But then he also went on to point out that, even though everyone's talking about the insurance industry and healthcare, that it really increases risk across all industries because obviously so many different companies have healthcare that they provide to their employees. Yeah, basically he just advises, that all organizations should review their healthcare industry exposure and assess the impact as a supply chain risk, since it has, so many of their workers might be potentially exposed with all these recent breaches affecting millions and millions of people.
Yeah, there's the direct fraud, and then usually when a big attack like this happens, immediately there's a wave of phishing attacks that sort of follows on. So any of those employees sitting on a company computer get an email about this breach, they might open this phishing email, and then your company's compromised. So these are the kind of breaches that very well could affect any company, not just healthcare.
Moving on to another interesting story that I saw this week. There's the Target ruling just got handed down, and I think I saw this morning that a judge said that he'd okay it. Target has agreed to pay $10 million in their class action lawsuit settlement. Basically, just a quick kind of run through what's in that settlement. Individuals who are able to prove that they suffered financial losses as a direct result of the breach are eligible to up to $10,000 in damages. And then any money left over in the fund after, everyone submitted their claims is going to be distributed according to the court's instructions. And then there was also some notes in there about Target just continuing to designate a chief information security officer to oversee their enterprise security, maintain their written security policy, and periodically review the controls that it has in place. But I think what's interesting about this story is we've seen in the past so many, pretty much every time there's a big breach, there's a class action lawsuit, and it seems like it always gets dismissed. So some people are kind of just pointing out that this could potentially pave the way for other potential class action lawsuits. Aviva Latan, she's a analyst at Gartner, and you see her name pretty much in dozens of different stories. She's always getting quoted. But she was talking about this settlement, which is going to get approved, and just kind of pointing out that, she said, what this tells me broadly is that the courts are now leaning against retailers and buying arguments that consumers do suffer damages in the form of late fees, blocked bank or credit accounts, and time spent dealing with the damages. So it'd be interesting, over the next, year just to see how these other lawsuits play out and see if this Target ruling actually does impact in any way other lawsuits, I guess.
Yeah, and when I look at this, $10 million sounds like a lot of money. I'd be really interested to see how the Home Depot is going to play out when that's all said and done, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, I'm pretty sure I saw something on the Home Depot, a story around credit unions, and they were actually on the hook for wasn't it $60 million? And so, I don't know what that was like with Target, how much it costs to replace cards and things like that. But, when I look at it like that, if banks had to pay more money, doesn't that mean that Target, they're being asked to, they're being forced to pay people? But I don't know. I look at that number, and for me personally, I'm also almost think it's still a slap on the wrist, because that's a $10 million to a company like Target, is a drop in the bucket.
Yeah, especially when you consider the 40 million people potentially impacted.
Right.
And they set a max for individuals up to 10,000. So if there are 10,000, or if there are people being awarded $10,000, that's 1,000 people max that can receive that. And I don't know when the lawyers take their cut, but I'm sure it'll be sizable. So, but you're right. The cases on behalf of credit unions and banks could be interesting, because they probably did lose and can prove it a lot more than your random average citizen. So it might not be done yet.
Yeah, I think that's just, I guess one of the more interesting things as well is, this breach happened, late 2013, so 14 months ago it first made the news, and, here we are still talking about it. It just goes to show how these things kind of continue to drag on in terms of the brand damage and things like that, just kind of constantly resurfacing, sort of bringing their name back into the news in a negative way. Before we wrap up, is there any other interesting stories that we want to chat about?
There's an article I wrote this week about this Tesla Crypt ransomware. It's being discussed a lot because it's affecting video games, and so we have a lot of really popular titles. I'm sure everyone's listening to this, and I play these games. Game franchises like Call of Duty, Dragon Age, even Minecraft are being affected with this Tesla Crypt ransomware. And what it does, it encrypts game data, so a player, all their saved content and everything they can't access, and they're being demanded to pay a payment of 1.5 Bitcoin, which is about $415. It's important to point out, though, it's getting a lot of attention because it's affecting, video games. So it's like, oh no, my video game. But it does a lot more than that. It actually goes through a user's gaming platform, whatever they're doing. So if they have, any photos, videos, any documents they have on there, that is also encrypted. So it's a lot more than just video games. Last year from Lizard Squad, we had a lot of those pointless DDoS attacks, as I like to call them, by Lizard Squad. And then kind of since December, we have gaming attacks were on the decline. But as we saw in Surfwatch Labs data, it's only halfway through the month, and the trend on gaming attacks is starting to rise again. And we'll have to wait and see how this TeslaCrypt ransomware, if that's going to remain a key player in that or not.
I believe I saw World of Warcraft on the list of games that was affected and targeted by this. So I'm sure not every person would care enough, but I certainly know some people who I think would pay $400 to get their accounts back.
To keep their level 60 warrior or something like that they've invested years in?
Yeah, it takes a lot of time. So
it does.
Well, kind of a side note, but I've been really working on my SimCity on my Android for the last couple months now, so if I had to start all over, it'd be pretty depressing. So moving on to the cyber tip of the week. FireEye put out basically their Mandiant in the trenches kind of study of what they've observed the past year. And one of the things that they pointed out that I thought was interesting to note as reading through that is they just said that in 2014, the trend of targeting VPNs hit a new watermark. They saw more cases in which attackers gained access to victims' VPNs than ever before. And they said there was really two common VPN attack techniques. The first was just, single-factor authentication. Basically, if the victim's VPN, just needed a username and password, the attacker simply reused stolen credentials, in order to get in. And I think that was, if I remember right, the case in the USPS breach in 2014. It was speculated that they got in via a VPN that just had single-factor authentication. And then they said the second one that they saw a lot of was people using, or businesses using, certificate-based two-factor authentication. And they said if the victim's VPN required a per-user digital certificate as a second authentication factors, attackers just simply used widely available tools to extract these certificates from the compromised end-user systems. So I just thought that was an interesting thing to point out and make sure businesses are aware of. Obviously, if you're using a VPN, try to have multi-factor authentication on there, but then be aware that even if you do, there's still other ways that hackers or cyber criminals can still get into your system. Yeah, so that's it for this week's discussion. Coming up, we have our interview with Dave LeClair. I spoke to him last week before the TeslaCrypt ransomware stuff hit the news, but we talk about basically other things that were in the news in regards to ransomware and what businesses can do in order to stay safe. Started, I guess what stood out to me is there's a lot of people talking about ransomware right now in the news, but a lot of times it's at the consumer level. And I'm wondering your thoughts on how big of a concern that it should be for businesses, because I've read some people saying that people are sort of overreacting to this ransomware and stuff that's going on, and then some people saying that it should be a real big concern.
I look at this like any other thing that could possibly impact your business. You need to have contingency plans for things that can go wrong. Is this the type of thing that's probably keeping people up at wake and night, worrying about being hit by a ransomware attack in their business? Probably not. That said, they're probably not worried, at night about their building burning down or, being hit by a tsunami or, a man-made disaster wiping out their data. However, that doesn't mean we don't put protections in place so that if something bad were to happen, we're prepared to deal with it and not have to suffer any severe consequences. It's similar to, I don't expect my house to catch on fire or, to have a heart attack, but that doesn't mean I don't put insurance on my house and buy life insurance for myself to protect my family. So Unitrends focuses on data protection solutions. So I think there's a lot of things from a security aspect that you can do to prevent the attacks from happening in the first place. What we're looking at this as is, well, what happens if something does actually get through your security safety nets and you do get impacted? We think that data protection solutions, backup, recovery, and all the things that we do are a very natural and fast remedy to a ransomware demand, rather than having to either deal with lost data or to have to pay as a result.
I'd kind of like to chat a little bit about that, like for businesses out there, they want to sort of have that security. My understanding is basically you want to have everything backed up, but I mean, is it as simple as that to defend against ransomware, or is there other aspects to it that I'm not thinking of?
There's a lot of different ways that you can put backups in place. And backups are done for backing up real-time data so that you can have a low recovery time objective and recovery point objective so that you can respond to disasters when they affect your business. Depending on how you do those can affect whether your backup is going to be sufficient to recover from a ransomware. You probably need to do other things as well, such as archiving snapshots and getting those disconnected from your systems, because you can do backups that are near continuous data protection. Our systems offer backups that can happen as frequently as every 60 seconds. You can get to the situation where you're actually backing up the problem. You actually back up the virus to your backup system if you don't have other means of doing recovery. So if that happens, you can't instantly say, well, I've been doing automated backups, they're there, I'll just go back to my last backup. You may have to go back sufficiently in time to make sure that you're getting into a clean system. You're getting into a clean set of data. And there's different techniques for how you would go about doing that and where you should actually store those, whether you should be kind of archiving to tape and then moving those tapes off site, or, archiving to the cloud. We generally use what we call the kind of rule of 3 with backup solutions, which basically says you should have 3 versions, 3 copies of your data. It should be on 2 different forms of media. In other words, they both shouldn't be hard disk based. You should have hard disk and tape, or hard disk and cloud, or SAN and low cost rotational drives like SATA drives. And one of those copies should be off-site. So 3 copies across 2 media, one of them should be off-site. That generally gets you a pretty protected environment as a general rule. How you go about doing that, there's a lot of different techniques based on what kind of RPO and RTO you're looking to get out of your solution.
I'm curious how many businesses you think are actually doing that. I know I saw that there was a Spiceworks survey that said only 30% of IT managers believe that they could restore all of the data they need following a data loss event. Is that, in your opinion, accurate, that 70% wouldn't be able to then restore what they need?
I think it's pretty accurate, particularly for mid-size and smaller customers. I think larger enterprises probably do a decent job of making sure their systems are backed up. In their case, the complexity comes in is, how recently have they tested that they can actually get back quickly. But, many businesses have no disaster recovery plan in place. And those that do have it in place, we see about half of them, it doesn't work the way that they think it would when they actually try and put it in place. That shows up pretty consistently in surveys that we do, that we've done with third parties, and we've seen elsewhere. So it's a pretty big problem. There's a lot of people that really aren't covered at all. There are a lot of people that are not covered sufficiently, and the number of people and enterprises that have really done their due diligence and know that they're covered with absolute confidence is pretty small.
Yeah, I'd like to get your thoughts on whether people should ever pay a ransom demand. We asked a bunch of people, this was probably a couple weeks ago, and we kind of did an article about it on HackSurfer, and I was surprised at the number of people who basically said, well, there is a lot of situations where maybe it is beneficial to pay, if you don't have everything backed up and you didn't do your due diligence beforehand. So I'm just wondering your thoughts in general on that.
Yeah, I think it's a bad trend to actually pay off the criminal element that is actually trying to do these things. However, I do think putting yourself in a situation of a business or someone who's lost critical data that's irreplaceable, I could see where it would be tempting to pay it off. A lot of businesses that have this sort of severe disruption, if they don't recover quickly and get back online very quickly, it can be a catastrophic event. For a large business, it could mean millions and millions of dollars in lost business and damages. For a mid-sized or smaller business, it could mean the end of your business. So staring that dragon in the eyes, I could see where it would be tempting to pay. That said, I think that should be an absolute last resort, and I think you're far better off, working on your security systems and your backup systems to make sure you're in a situation that it never comes to that. This is something that should be easily avoidable, following some basic best practices without having to really break the bank. There's all sorts of easy-to-use backup systems, including ours, that include cloud components that so you can get stuff off-site without having to have a secondary site yourself. There's a lot of different ways to solve this problem. So I think that's the real solution here is be prepared, put the necessary protections in place, and if for some reason something sneaks in and this actually occurs to you, you ignore it, you go back, you do a restore from a known good set of data, and you go on your way.
I'm wondering if you guys have any customers that have dealt with ransomware or these kind of attacks, and if so, if there's any kind of thing that stands out in your mind about those.
I haven't heard from any specific customers that have dealt with a ransomware attack yet. Have heard from a few customers who have brought it up as just yet another kind of type of disaster that you have to kind of plan for. It's certainly something that wasn't on anybody's radar that long ago. It's now certainly on par with all the other man-made and natural disasters that we have to prepare for to make sure that we're resilient and you can have business continuity pretty much regardless of what pops up in your business.
Yeah, I don't know if you've been following recently. I think it was High Tech Bridge, or a security company, and they put out a report about kind of this ransom web attack, they're calling it. Basically, it's like a ransomware attack, but it's almost like a DDoS attack, in that it encrypts your website so people can't get to it. And I was reading a Forbes article that said that the attackers demanded $50,000 after doing that attack. So it's kind of a more sophisticated version of this. I don't know if you followed it at all, but if you did, I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts kind of about that evolution.
I think I did see that. I did read the piece that was put out on that. I think that's the unfortunate way of the world is, these attacks, which start out, originally pretty crude, have gotten more sophisticated both at the kind of consumer or individual PC level, and they're now migrating. They're up to attacks servers, and particularly hitting a company's website can be particularly catastrophic because it's visible to the outside world, particularly if you're running e-commerce. But even if you're not, it's your face to the outside world. Having that shut down for any business really can be a catastrophic event. So it's not surprising that these attacks are getting more sophisticated and that the dollar amounts being asked for are going to go up as the impact goes up as well. Again, I don't think this is something that most businesses are going to have to deal with on a regular basis at this time, but this is probably an evolving battle where protections are put in place, and the attacks get more mature and sophisticated. Better protections are put in place. The attacks figure out a way around those, and vice versa. And unfortunately, just like all forms of viruses, it seems to be a never-ending battle.
Yeah, that's pretty much all the questions I have, unless there's anything else kind of that sticks out to you about ransomware you wanted to chat about.
No, I think, as I said earlier, we view this as kind of just yet another contingency that kind of needs to be planned for. Fortunately, the easiest remedy for this is simply to put a decent backup and recovery and disaster recovery solution in play. Unfortunately, that's not something that you're doing specifically just for ransomware. I mean, that's applicable for any type of disaster, whether it's man-made or natural, or something that's as simple as hardware component failure. So, I mean, it's a good best practice. Enterprises should have those plans and solutions in place. And if they do, when these things happen, or even if they get more sophisticated over time, you should be covered. You should be able to just hit a button and rewind the clock in your system a bit before you were infected, and be good to go.
That's it for this week's Cybercrime and Business Podcast. As always, if you want more information, check out HackSurfer.com and SurfWatchLabs.com, and be sure to follow us on iTunes, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and everywhere else.